Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Cali, Colombia, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show and welcome to Q&A day. Interview day. Well, I have, you know what? Our interviewer is so interesting that I have lots of cues for him to A. And I'm here with Mara's eyeball, as you can see, because we have a very weak internet connection. So Mara does not get her own mic. We just gave her this microphone and now we've taken it back. So she has no microphone. She's got to use my microphone. And we have a really special guest today, Radhikesh Sharma, who's a doctor and an astrologer. And we're going to talk a little bit about astrology, but we're really going to talk about his life and sort of Radhikesh, welcome to the show. He's got such an interesting story. I went to get my chart read from him when I was in Alachua, and he's very, very expert at astrology. And in that process, he shared his story. And I tell you, since we all went through a rough 2020, most likely, and 2021 was sort of a punch in the gut as well for a lot of us, Radhikesh, he trumped my story, a lot of stories out there, and he applied a lot of Krishna to the sinkhole of material existence. And he's going to pepper it with astrology, and we're going to ask some cues, and I'm excited to have you on the show, Radhikesh. Welcome.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. I just want to say before we start that I love your guys' show. My family loves your guys' show, and what you guys are doing is so incredible for everybody out there who's listening. You're like an oasis in the desert for so many of us with the things that you share with us. And just, I want you both to know, all three of you to know how greatly we appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Mara, you hear that? He's including you too. There. We're not cutting you out of the team. You're still on the team, Mara. Thanks, Radhikesh Prabhu. So you live in Florida. That's where I met you. We were down in Florida, and his beautiful family came up to me and approached me at the festival and said, hey, we listen to the Sages. We're others. We're out there. And then he said, I'm an astrologer also. And I said, oh, you're an astrologer. Let me give you my information just in case you ever want to run it. And next day he called me up and we had a play date where I came over and we talked astrology and we ate some prasad and then we just start to share our heart to each other. And he has such a good story. I was like, we got to get this story on Wisdom of the Sages. So we're happy to have you. Can we just start off a little bit of just simple questions about astrology, Vedic astrology? In the West, when you talk about astrology, people mistake it with something sort of pseudoscience, some woman in a storefront window with a bandana on her head. And where in India, astrology is used for everything. You don't build a temple. You don't get married. You conceive. The birth of the child. It's so important. You want to just share. It's more like engineering in India as opposed to something sort of pseudo scientific. Will you share, please?
Absolutely. So astrology is a science, and as a science, it has its rules, its laws, it's reproducible. It's something that you can apply in every aspect of your life, and it will give you the results that you're looking for. So if you want to get married and have a good marriage or be with a good partner, you can do a compatibility study. If you want to understand the nature of your children when they're born, or what they may be going through at different times, you can do a study, an astrological study that looks at the karma they've had built up over lifetimes that they're dealing with now. You basically have to think of an astrology chart as kind of a roadmap of the things that you will go through in your life, the karmas that you have to deal with in your life, like the DNA you have in this lifetime. And then at different points, you make choices on how you deal with those karmas that come upon you. So yes, people use it for building houses, for their children, for marriage, for just finding out, hey, I've got this health problem, or I've got this difficulty going on. How long is this going to last? One nice thing astrology does, it gives clarity on the things that are important to you. That how long, is this difficulty going to last in my life? When are things that seem stuck and not improving, when are they going to get better? One of the important things, and all of these different things we use astrology for, what the important thing is that it makes you understand, makes you realize that you're not alone, that there's a method to the madness of life sometimes, that Krishna is guiding the things that we are going through. And when we understand that we're not alone in going through these things, it becomes much easier for us to walk through some of the more difficult parts of our life.
Prabhu, that was a nice explanation. Sometimes in America we have you learn a trade from your parent. Like my father was a carpenter and he taught me how to do carpentry, but his father was also a carpenter. I know in our band, our drummer's father was a drummer and his grandfather was a drummer. How many generations has astrology been in your family?
My family has been doing astrology for about 1,000 generations, as far back as we know.
One of his greatest ancestors was a dinosaur, and he did astrology as well. He was a triceratops, a really nice Brahminical triceratops. I'm just kidding. That is incredible. 1,000 generations. I had to ask that question because he told me that on the phone yesterday. But these are like family things passed on. And Indians are famous for keeping things within family lines like this. This is amazing. And did they do your chart when you were born?
They did my chart when I was born, yes.
And you have proclivities towards, I don't know what you'd call it, astrology, mysticism, etc.
Absolutely, yeah. It's there. It was there from the beginning that this person has a natural inclination toward being an astrologer. And being in a family that practices astrology, it sometimes makes it easier to take in those skills. So yes, that was always there. Just like with my kids, I'm also teaching them astrology. They have natural proclivity to learning. So yes, it was always there, and I grew up around it. I'm hearing it all the time. So when I, dove deeper into it, it certainly came quite naturally.
But how useful is that to find out for a parent to find out what your kids are into? Like, oh my God, I've been making I was playing the violin for years. I stunk at the violin. If they only did my astrological chart, they would know, you belong playing guitar, sir. You belong playing, it's like we've wasted time, not just feeling in the dark to try to find, what will be great in. And astrology seems to be a great guiding light for parents.
It really is helpful for parents. And the number one way it helps parents, it helps you understand the nature of your children, what their personality is, what's going to make them feel happy and secure and loved, what's going to make them feel satisfied in life. Parents sometimes don't understand that children don't think the same way they do. Their natures may be completely different. And once you get a little idea of that, you understand the best way to approach your children to have them understand you, the best way to help them succeed and achieve what their life is meant to be. So it's really fundamental to get a birth chart done for your kids, so you understand from the beginning what they're like and the ups and downs they're going to go through in their life, so you can kind of okay, when they go through a bad period in their life, you understand, okay, this is not a bad child or an evil child. This is like the modes of nature are having an influence on them right now, and things will improve.
And what if it is an evil child? Does your chart say that?
And you know that too.
You know? Oh, this
Then
one's
what do you
particularly
do?
evil. We keep him in the garage. So, Prabhu, so you weren't always a full-time astrologer. You were a medical doctor. Can you tell us your story? How you met your wife? You have these 3 beautiful children. You live in a beautiful home. You live right by the Alachua Temple. Tell us your story.
Absolutely. So, I was born in England, lived there for 11 years before we moved to the US. And in England, from the beginning, we were always going, since the manor opened, we were always going to the temple. So we've been, my family's been devotees since the very early times. Basically, my wife and I went to medical school, practiced for 20 years. My wife and I we were introduced through my sister, and we talked to each other we saw each other for 5 minutes, and the families asked us, oh, do you want to get married?
Did you hear that, everybody?
5 minutes.
They met each other for 5 minutes. That's so old school.
It is. And it's been 22 years. So
we can call that a blind date marriage, can't we?
We could. Like, we didn't see each other. We just met and talked, and that's it. And we've been married now for 22 years.
I hate you.
She's wonderful.
She is wonderful.
You met her. Yes,
wonderful.
you met her.
Yeah.
You met Premanjali. Yeah. And our kids, we lived in Ohio, but we moved here simply so our kids could go to the Gurukul here. And all 3 of them have spent most of their life in the Gurukul in Alachua and off to college and things like that. So it's been a really amazing journey. And, I got deeper into astrology was always part of my life, but it became more strong into my life. First, in what happened, the material world, everything is going perfect. You're at the top of your career and all these things are going well. And then 2012, I got diagnosed with this like horrific disease, like this deadly disease out of nowhere. And I was like, okay, Krishna, what's going on here? What is this? And so I went to my astrologer, and he said, no, don't worry about this. It's going to go away in a couple of years. You'll be fine. And I was like, as a physician, I said, no, that's not possible. That doesn't happen with this type of thing. I just felt like my life is going to be transformed in very negative or heavy ways in affecting me. But I just simply kept moving forward, even though it was very painful, very difficult. You can imagine being perfectly healthy, active, energetic with job and 3 young children. And all of a sudden this storm comes into your life. But 2 years later, it was gone, and which medically, I was like, this is not a possibility. But astrologically, it was correct. And it went away in 2 years. So around that time, around 2012, I really got deeper into my own study of astrology. And I was like, I need to it's just a reminder that you need to get back into this. And so this is what I kind of started doing at that point, and it continued since then. And of course, the other storms that came into my life made that study even deeper for me. So.
Sure. It's these storms that either break us or drive us deeper and deeper. It's so good to see you came out the other side. But more storms are coming. Continue.
Yes, more storms are coming. So that was a little storm compared to this one. So 2014, all of a sudden, I'm living in Florida. I'm just kind of going to the temple, doing my work, still working as a physician. And then federal agents from the United States government show up at my door.
Well, you missed a point. You missed a point that you were living in the Midwest, and you had a whole. You were more than a doctor. You had a whole medical center.
I had a huge medical center. I had 12 doctors working for me. I had this whole, practice going on that I built from the ground up, basically. And so these 2 federal agents show up at my door, and I'm just like out of nowhere. and begins. And they're like, we're investigating things at your practice with some particular one person. And, and I was like, hey, I have no idea what's going on. I've been living down here. I'm happy to assist in any way that I can. So one thing led to another. And
it was one of your employee doctors?
Exactly.
Okay.
And one thing led to another. It was bewildering. It was, it's not that all of a sudden I'm just like, oh yeah, this is great, Krishna, whatever you want to do in my life, no problem. It was painful. Fear and anxiety and worry, they overwhelm the mind in a situation like this. You got the feds coming and talking to you. But I did everything I could to help. And basically, what happens is that when you go through a situation like this, you can see yourself as a victim, or you can see yourself as, this is the karma that I have to deal with in my life. And that is a process. It's not that you just wake up and accept everything that happens. No, I went through, this went on from 2014 to 2019, 5 years of this uncertainty, of this pain, of this anxiety, of this fear, of this worry, many dark days where your life is kind of stuck, which is the astrological period I was in anyway. It was Ketu. So this is right during that period when this happened. Ketu causes restrictions and limitations in your life. And I'm just trying to understand what's happening. And so, I hired an attorney, and the karma, there's some heavy karma that I had to deal with. And the attorney ends up taking all my money and doesn't do anything, one after another. So eventually I had 2 lawyers. First one didn't do much. The second one didn't do much. Then finally I hired a third one. And I was like, look, something has to give here. There's some impasse. And he comes to me and he's like, what do you know about this case? I was like, I actually don't know much about it. I don't know anything that's going on. And he says to me, you have to, he's not a devotee, certainly, but the words he used were very much of a devotee. He said, you have to approach this with humility. You're dealing with a very powerful entity, and you have to approach this with humility. And, by that point, I simply understood that whether it's the government or, the judge or whatever it is, I didn't hold any animosity toward them. They're simply instruments of my karma, the things that have to happen in my life. Now, it's not that I didn't fight with every arrow I had in my quiver, just like Arjuna did. I simply did my best. But at every point, I simply said, Krishna, I trust you, and whatever journey you're taking me on, I will do my best. And so eventually, I got to the point where I had to sign an agreement with the government saying, I accept the things that you are doing in my life. I had no ability to do it otherwise. It was at that point where I had no strength left, no arrows left to shoot. And when I did that, I didn't do it with a feeling of negativity or a feeling of, oh, this is not my fault. How could this happen to me? This is wrong. It wasn't like that. It was simply a feeling of, this is the karma that has been brought to me. I can either move forward strongly, embrace this difficulty and use it for the best, use this obstacle to grow more deeply, or I can get crushed underneath it and become the victim. And as a devotee, we become, especially by the love and association and prayers of our devotee friends, well-wishers, and teachers, we can become stronger and have the courage to deal with situations like this. And so I simply took it in that way, that yes, this karma has come and I have to use it in the best way. And my guru, Raghunath Swami, helped me so much through this and giving me so much guidance. My mentors here, Madhumati Mataji and Shesha Prabhu, also gave me so much guidance. They were my rocks, my pillars through this. There's days when, not days, weeks, months, years, where I'm waking up at 3 a.m. in tears that I'm going through this type of difficulty. and pain. And, they're there every single day to give me the strength and give me their prayers to get through this. My wife is waking up with me every day at 3 a.m. and telling me, Krishna is with you. Don't worry. Whatever happens, we're together. Krishna will get us through this. One way I like to explain it is that when the days came, when I felt my hands were slipping off of Krishna's lotus feet and I couldn't hold on, I felt my wife taking her hands and putting them on top of mine and pushing them onto Krishna's feet. This is how difficult and painful this situation was. Basically, at this point, all my money that I'd saved up is gone. My work as a physician is being devastated. My identity, since I've been a kid, I've been working towards being a doctor. That's all been ripped away. So it's
now, Prabhu, let me just interrupt for a second. I know legally you have to dance around some of the things you're saying right now. So if I could just fill in some blanks a little bit without saying anything wrong. Let's see if I do. You're in this position where you're a doctor. You have other doctors working for you. You're making fist over fist of money. Sure. You've moved away from the profession so you could raise your kids in a Krishna conscious school where there's more devotees, and the business is going on without you there. And then something happens in that business that is out of your control. And all of a sudden you have to take the hit for all of it. And it's coming from the blind side. You thought you could, of course, thought you could get out of it because you didn't feel, anyway, I don't know even what I can say here, but the fact is it's all collapsing. And despite all the lawyers you hired, all the good advice you've got, your stance in the matter, you're going down. They're taking you down in the biggest way possible. And it's not like you have an angry neighbor. You have the federal government taking you down, which is about to destroy basically everything you've worked for your entire life. That's
a good way of putting it. Yes, that's exactly right. Literally, your identity is ripped away. It's like slow death in many ways, because everything I've ever had, everything I've ever identified with, everything I've ever had in terms of respect and, your nature, this is who you are, this is part of your job. And for physicians, that's a big thing,
Yeah, I'm a physician, or I'm a family man, and I live in this home. This is my home, and you're about to lose it all.
Everything is being ripped away.
So how did it end up collapsing? Let's get right to the quicksand.
Let's get right to it. I ended up, we had to go to court before the judge. You go to a sentencing hearing, because at this point, I have to plead guilty to a felony. So you become a felon, and crazy.
Does that mean you lose your license if you plead guilty as a felon?
Yes.
There's one part of your identity stripped away.
Stripped away right there. But every time I went to court, every time I had to deal with one heaviness after another, wherever I went, even though in my mind there's such deep pain, such deep fear, such deep anxiety, at every step, I simply said, Krishna, I trust you. Krishna, you have a plan in all of this. And that strength to do that comes not from me. That comes from the prayers of the devotees. That comes from the mercy of the Guru and the Parampara and the Srimad Bhagavatam giving you that strength and energy to get through those things. So we all go through difficulties in our life, whether it's a legal problem or a financial problem or a health problem, problems with our kids. These difficulties will come in this material world naturally, and it's just a question of how we respond to it. And if we can take shelter of the devotees and the prayers of the devotees and the Bhagavatam and these things, we can get through because we get a strength that we may not otherwise know is there.
All right, so tell us what you had to get through. What was it?
I ended up, if everybody's ready to hear this, I went to, court sentencing hearing, expecting to get probation. And I ended up being sentenced to federal prison.
Oh my God.
Federal prison, yeah.
Did you have to join a gang in prison? It's the first thing that comes to mind. Did you have to pick? I've heard gang stories in prison.
The Gujarati gang?
The Gujarati gang, are they tough?
Probably not, right?
They're great cooks.
They got great food.
We don't mess with you if you make us some sabji and some dal. They have very good dal in Gujarat. Tell me, did you do time?
I did.
Oh my God.
Yes.
What's a nice Brahmin boy like you doing in prison?
You know, I asked myself that many times. I asked myself that many, many times, that what is happening? And, you know, I kept a journal and I would write in my journal, Krishna, I'm not sure what you want from me in here, but I'm simply going to do my best to serve you through this. Now, I don't want to read too much of my journal, but if you guys want, I can read like the first day that I was there.
Yeah, please.
I think you need your own podcast.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, this is getting pretty fascinating, and you have such a nice way of viewing everything and explaining that viewpoint. So yes, please read.
This is my first day in prison. When you walk in, I explain the whole process of what, I had a friend of mine, Varuna Prabhu, he drove me there. And so I'm at home and, they allow you to drive there. So, but when you get there, they take all your clothes. They take, I had my japa beads, I had my tulsi mala, my Brahman. They take everything and they put you in this you're in prison clothes. All of a sudden, your identity is completely ripped away. You're just a number. You get this ID card with your picture on it. And even when they took my picture, I remember this vividly, I smiled from my picture because I said, Krishna, you have a plan, even in this great difficulty that you're bringing into my life. And this is the first day. This is November 4th, 2019, my first day in prison. My dear Radha Shyam Sundar, you are my Lord and Master. I am simply an instrument in your hands. I have resisted you mentally and physically for so long. All my energies, strengths, and power have been obliterated by your sweet will. This does feel quite painful to me, but I am your servant, and I cannot always understand or ever understand your shelter. I trust you, my dear Shyam, my dear Madhav, my dear Giriraj. Love, trust, and faith in the heart, despite all the changes in the mind and material position. It is only in this position, when I am deeply surrendered to your will, that I realize I have nothing except you. You are my solace, my strength, my hope. The words and kindness of your devotees are my eternal joy. They give me strength, peace, and a remembrance of what I have in life. I am so fortunate to have the love of your devotees, my family, and your written words. In the middle of nowhere in this prison, you are unlocking the prison of my heart, my deep-seated material desires, and asking me to take your love. I'm in a cubicle with 5 beds, wearing green prison clothes, simple blankets and pillows. I deeply miss my dear family, and I am not sure why we are separated. But I belong to your heart. I am here to please you. Let me fulfill your desires in this place as you see fit, if I am able. Above all, give me the strength to grow and serve you. I do not wish to fail in whatever reason you have sent me here. They took my kantimala, didn't allow my japa beads, and I have no Brahman thread. I stand with no marks of a devotee except my internal meditation upon you. Lord Nrsingadev, the protector of the devotees, I see your beautiful face of Ugra Nrsinga in Mayapur. My mind asks with sadness and anger, where is your protection? That Narasimha who protected Prahlad, who protects Mayapur, who protects the devotees. Where is that shelter for me? You have forgotten only me. Dearest Nrsingadev, please do not be offended by the words of my mind, because you know my heart is yours. I may never understand your shelter, at least not for years, but I understand through my guru and senior devotees that it is there for me. I wish you had made this easier, but the path of devotees is set by thorns at every step. I have stepped in a pile of sharp thorns and been deeply wounded.
Wow, that's beautiful. Sentiments.
That was a little bit more Krishna conscious than I was expecting. I was like, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to get that warden, that damn warden. I wanted to hear about your roommates, what the cafeteria was like. But okay, you're God conscious. I get it. It was actually that was pages out of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That was like the prayers of Gajendra, the prayers of Draupadi, the prayer, right? The suffering, going through the suffering and just turning your heart over to Krishna, accepting it as a divine plan.
Yes, it was as much as I could do. And it was only by the prayers and love of the devotees, of Raghunath Swami, that gave me the strength to get through this. It was, this was the first day, and, I can certainly share what the place was like and how I dealt with a lot of things there. But it was one thing I realized, as to grow in devotional life, sometimes we have to face our worst fears, walk through that fire of our worst fears with, not just walk through it with tolerance, but walk through it with gratitude, with appreciation, with following in the footsteps of the parampara and the devotees who have come before us. Walking through it, holding the Srimad Bhagavatam is our shelter.
Wow.
And stories of Draupadi and Gajendra and the Avanti Brahman and Bali Maharaj. And when we walk through it with that shelter, we get through it in a very powerful and transforming way. And at this point, I'm alone. I've gone from, my loving family in Alachua, surrounded by devotees and love, to this very hellish environment that is completely alien to me, to people who are completely alien to me. And I've never been around people like
What kind of people are in a prison like that? Was it a high-end prison, or was it a real danger, like Rikers Island type of prison? I'm not going to dwell on this, but I just want to get a picture in my mind. And I think there's a few people out there that just want to, what is prison like?
First of all, there's no such thing as a high-end prison. You're not at the
There's not a high-end, like a 5-star prison on TripAdvisor. Okay.
There's not massages available every night and things like that. No, nothing like that. It was, you're in this kind of cubicle with 5 beds, and you got people sleeping there who are snoring and doing all kinds of crazy things, and some people are very decent and some you have rough characters. But one thing is that a lot of these people, they've been there for a long time. They're depressed and angry and empty and sad inside. And they're just like they're like the Walking Dead in some ways. And they're ready to explode if anything kind of doesn't go their way. You touch them one way. So you have to be very careful in that environment.
How were your cellmates? How are they?
You can kind of pick and choose. Sometimes to a
degree. You can pick your cellmates?
No, you can pick and choose. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought you meant you could pick and choose, like some are good and some not.
I don't want him. I don't want him. He's very strong. I don't want him.
Yeah, you can because you can fill out a piece of paper, say, okay, these guys are over here. I want to move over there. Because you have people there who are attorneys and lawyers, and then you have drug dealers, and you have the whole range. So people kind of congregate with people who they feel comfortable. So that you can do. Doesn't always work out, but fortunately for me, at some point, I got that to work out.
I have a question.
Sure.
And that is that I just want to make sure, and I think for a lot of our listeners too, this might be an important context to place this whole conversation in. But I think when people think of astrology, they think of like, oh, this is something to predict the future. And when people hear that, then they think, well, then you must be saying that like our fate is already all laid out. I just want to see if I articulate this well, or if you agree, like this is how we can understand this, is that basically what these yogic texts are telling us is that all of our actions create reactions. And so we all have karma coming to us, and it's, in a sense, it's written in the stars, like in a general sense of how and when that karma will play out. But at the same time, we have the freedom to respond to what's coming. And so some knowledge of what's happening and what we're going through can be helpful for us to conceive of how to respond. Is that?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
It's how we respond. Yes, you're going through certain karmas in your life, but how we respond, the choices we make in that situation, creates our karma for the future, because the choices we've made in the past gave us our karma now. And
Right.
in difficulty, how we choose to respond to it will give us our karma for the future.
So I find your situation here very interesting, because in one sense you've lived a pious life, you've lived a good life, you obviously have a kind of a pious Vaishnava, or at least Hindu upbringing. You're successful as a doctor and serving people through it, and then apparently, like, no fault of your own, you're thrown into prison, and you have to deal with that. And as Raghunath was saying, I would imagine most people wouldn't be composing the kind of prayers you're composing there on the first day in prison. Most people would be full of fear, full of anxiety, full of anger, resentment, all kind of very powerful emotions they would be experiencing. You must have felt like, okay, I may not have done anything in this life to bring, this may be unfair from one perspective, but something that I have done somewhere in the past has led me to this point. Is that how you?
That's exactly right. I never saw it as, oh, how is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? But it's a process to get to that point. It's not like all of a sudden when it happens, you're like, oh yeah, this is great, no problem.
Yeah.
It certainly
It's
wasn't
easy to say that, but when you're put into that kind of circumstance, it's very, and so it seems to be. How long did you spend in prison?
I ended up spending, I got a year and a day as my sentence.
Okay.
I ended up spending 5.5 months in the prison, and then 3.5 months in a halfway house.
And
Wow.
and now, and how long ago were you released?
I got out on April 21st, 2020. So
Just in
know,
time for
yeah.
for
Just in
COVID and
time for the
lockdown. You got locked down the other way.
After COVID, yes.
Okay, so viewing from the Vaishnava perspective, from the Bhakti-yoga perspective, that year or 5 months or a year or whatever you want to, if you put them both together, how do you understand it now? Like, what does it mean to you, and how has it changed you?
It was, if I could go back and change it so it never happened, I wouldn't do it.
Amazing.
You wouldn't do it. How beautiful.
I would not change it. It was absolutely the most difficult, the most painful, and the most amazing period of my life. It was transformative for my life as a devotee. I read the entire Srimad Bhagavatam when I was there. Let me kind of give you an idea of how you read the Srimad Bhagavatam.
That is wonderful.
This is like, if you imagine, you're sitting at your desk trying to read this book, and on one side you have people blasting rap music. On the other side, you have people blasting country music, and they're screaming back and forth at each other. And every word is a curse word. And with such anger and fire, and in that environment, you're trying to read the Bhagavatam. So there were many times I'm like, Krishna,
Oh,
where
you
want me
have
to
half
read
the prison like in their cell screaming, almost like a kennel. The dogs are barking, that's making the other dogs bark, and one's playing rap and one's playing country, and they're just screaming, cursing at each other.
Yeah, it's crazy, the things that you have to deal with in an environment like that. And there, I just, what normally you could read in an hour would take 3 hours because you have to just focus so much to read. But, there's several things I learned. I mean, there's a lot of things. You could talk about this for a long time. But one thing I wrote later in my journal is that I felt like I was a lonely sailor on a dark ocean going to nowhere. But what I realized is that actually I'm on a boat being guided by Krishna, who's taking me from this dark ocean to the beautiful, bright land of Goloka and just slowly pulling me along. In that I'm not alone. That though my mind may take me to so many different places, if you go deeper than the mind, if you go to the intelligence, to the level of realization, you understand, and like you guys say, you zoom out a little bit. You understand that this is simply a journey that we're on. And these are karmas that we have to go through. And when I accepted that at the deepest level, and I went through that fear, and what's the fear? The fear is our attachments, whether it's to our money, to our body, to our position, to our family, to respect, to being honored, to all of those things. And all those attachments are being ripped away. So at some point when that's happening, you have to, am I a devotee of Krishna? Am I really on this path, or am I just on it when it's comfortable? And when it gets a little painful, maybe it's not for me. Like, this is what you have to ask yourself.
There's a test of your devotion.
This is a test of devotion. And it's not about faith or strength of mind. It's actually about realization. And I've heard, Kaustubha, you mention this many times, where it's not just a mental issue. It's you develop a deep realization, a deeper understanding, because you're willing to walk through that fire with gratitude and appreciation. So now when I look at this, I have gratitude and appreciation for what I went through. I have gratitude and appreciation for the Vaishnavas. I have deeper love, gratitude, and appreciation for what my guru has taught me. Love, gratitude, and appreciation for what Madhumati Mataji and Shesha Prabhu, my mentors here, have taught me. Gratitude and appreciation for the strength of my wife and my children, who were so powerful in getting through this. You learn, one thing is strength. What is that strength you're getting? It's strength to tolerate the intolerable, to tolerate the pain that you're going through. Even more than that, to tolerate the pain that your family is going through. It's one thing to suffer yourself and say, yes, Krishna, this is my karma. But when you see it happening to your wife and your children going through that same pain, and to tolerate that as Krishna's will is very, very difficult. But
I can't even imagine the pain, because obviously you're going through pain. You're having this experience. You're getting, humiliated by everything getting stripped away. But then that fatherly feeling of like, what are my kids thinking? How are they? You can't even almost coach them through it. How is my wife? How is it affecting her sense of self, of her, how she walks in this world? I can't imagine that, the layers and layers of ego that Krishna and the Bhagavatam strips away to. And sure enough, like a phoenix, you guys rose. All your family is so impressive.
By the love and prayers of the devotees and our guru, they've had the strength to only grow stronger and more powerful through all this. They lived a very comfortable life. And when that wasn't there, they're like, we're Krishna's devotees. It's okay. What he does, we will simply follow and walk through that fire. And I was so amazed and impressed by what they did. I missed all their birthdays when I was gone, all of these things, which are so painful. But when I saw how they were transformed by all of this in the most amazing ways, I was, again, grateful, so grateful to see that.
I have just two quick things I want to share or bring up. And the first one is that people might look at astrology and see it's almost like a cop-out from life. Like, in other words, it's saying, well, everything's laid out, so what does it really matter? But what I'm seeing through your experience is that instead it became it helped facilitate your sense of what do we call it, Raghunath? Radical self, responsibility.
Radical responsibility.
That even though it appears like I did nothing to deserve this, I accept. I accept it, and I don't place the blame on anyone else. And with that, what would not only become a miserable, terrifying experience for most people, but also like a scarring experience, something that might actually might be something that carries a very negative influence in your life, even after your release. It seems like it's done the exact opposite, where you can sit here and say, even if I had to go through it again, I wouldn't, or if I could prevent it from happening, I wouldn't have, because I grew so much through it. That's absolutely a powerful example of how the knowledge of the Vedic knowledge, and part of that is the astrological, that limb of it, that anga of that Vedic teaching, how it becomes empowering in life rather than disempowering or leading towards a self, giving up responsibility. It's taking responsibility and becoming effective. So I think your life is a very powerful example of that. But the other thing I wanted to share was, what I notice sometimes is that the struggles that certain people go through in life is actually a way of preparing them to help others. And particularly like in a case like say someone goes through health difficulties, it can help them sympathize and walk other people through that. And as an astrologer, which quite frankly, people have all different kind of ideas of what an astrologer is, but from my perspective, what I've seen is that actually it's a wonderful position to help people, because people that do have faith in it, you can, in a practical way, you can help them, but you can really help steer them on a spiritual path. And I really get the impression that when I hear you speak and the kind of like the, not only the softness in your voice, but like just kind of like the clarity of your realizations and how you can share them in a really nice way, it seems to me like Krishna was preparing you to help many, many people, walk them through the challenges of their life from an incredible perspective because you were placed through such a unique challenge yourself.
I would say that while I was there, I actually wrote a book on astrology because I'd gotten so much deeper into it.
You wrote a book on astrology. Is that book released?
No, it's not released yet. What happened was the place got hit by a tornado and my book got destroyed because you have to write on paper. Yeah, that's a whole nother for another time. So then I rewrote.
That might have been worse than going to the prison. Is your whole book is destroyed by a tornado?
So I rewrote the entire book, and it's going to be coming out soon. But I think you're absolutely right. It's helped me, go deeper into the understanding of astrology, and I do a lot of life coaching through astrology also with that, because if you can kind of see what's going to happen, you can also prepare. You can kind of put the cart before the horse in that way. This is going to happen, and then you can astrologically prepare for those things. But it's definitely helped me go deeper into astrology to help people more through astrology and give people more insightful understanding for those things.
If I can zoom out for a moment and analyze your life for you, here's what I'm thinking when I hear this whole story. And there's a lot of great devotee doctors, spiritual doctors that we know, but you have such a gift to work with people. Perhaps in your situation, if you really look what happened, here you were isolated in the Midwest. You moved to Florida to have this massive devotee community to raise your children. They became very Krishna conscious, and you were still making a lot of money from that business. And then it all got taken away. Perhaps you could have never left that position. It's hard to give things up when you're making lots of money. You know how many people get into, want to give up alcohol, but they work in a bar and they can't because they get a lot of tips, or this is extreme the other way. You had to give all that up and then you just become this humble astrologer, and it almost like Krishna forced you to do it. He took away your identity, which is another gift for a devotee. Humiliation in the material world is miserable. Humiliation to be humbled as a devotee, it's the highest thing, because we know that there's inside that macadamia nut shell is like the beautiful meat of the macadamia nut. So that's like he's ripping everything away. And then who would have this gift that you have? You know, you're able to relate to people and guide people, and they look up to you. And perhaps this was the only way it could have happened. And it was a dark, dark tunnel, and you just went through it, holding on to Krishna's feet through the entire thing. It's a quite beautiful story.
I think about it often, and yes, Krishna closed. You're right. Who would leave a comfortable position and job unless it's ripped away from you? And Krishna did put me in a different path, and I'm very grateful for being on this path. And I think, that it certainly is, by the way you're describing it, I think it's going in that direction. By your mercy.
I know when you did my chart, and Mara has so many good. Mara came back like beaming after your chart.
Even the dark stuff in Mara's
even
chart.
all the dark stuff of Mara's life, you told her. But no, it was great, and really impressed, really inspired. And again, it's with this loving care of leading and teaching, and not just saying, okay, you're going to go through a miserable period and buckle down, the storm's coming. It's sort of like explaining what we can do with this. And the guidance was top class, as they say in India, top class. And we want to thank you. We're actually running out of time. I could have done this for hours. We're going to have you back on the show. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's say how people, because he does astrology, and we want to promote these great devotee astrologers and great teachers. We have had Drew Lawrence on the show, who everybody loves. But if you want to do a reading, what's the best way they can reach you, Radhikesh Prabhu?
So, a couple of ways. It's radhikeshdas.com is my website.
RADHIKESH DAS.
Yes, I'll put it in
DAS.com.
And Mary,
Okay.
you could put that in the notes to
Yeah.
the
And
show notes.
also Radhikesh Das on Instagram. And my email, people can call me, get hold of me, email is yourdestiny108@gmail.com.
I like that. Your Destiny 108.
We're Your Destiny 108 from Dayton, Ohio.
That is great. Well, thank you for. We have any takeaways today, Mayor?
Oh, we don't do takeaways.
We don't do
takeaways today. Oh man.
I
okay.
got the music lined up, by the way, so I should be good with that.
Well, we got the music too.
We're on at 6 a.m., right?
6 a.m. 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Who's doing the music here?
I got it.
He's got it. All right. Get rid of that. All right. Radhikesh.
Thank you,
Prabhu.
Radhikesh Prabhu.
Yeah. Inspirational stories. And you're setting such a great example for us how to deal with loss and reversal in this life. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Get in touch with Radhikesh. yourdestiny108@gmail.com. Quite impressive. And we give love to your family, your beautiful other family out there listening to the show. All of them. And your wonderful wife. And we're hoping to see you in person and go down to Alachua.
Absolutely. We would love it. It'd be wonderful.
Thanks for everybody joining us on Facebook Live. If you're listening on Facebook, we do this every day. You can listen to us and binge listen wherever you get podcasts. Wisdom of the Sages or Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, other various podcast hosts, Apple Podcasts. And thanks for everybody joining us live. If you'd like to join us live, you can. You know what? We should talk to Radhikesh if we'll do something for Patreon this week. We were talking about that overview on astrology workshops, which is just great to know. All right, So we'll contact you and we'll let our Patreon people know. If you like what we're doing, you can support us as a community-supported podcast. Patreon.com/Wisdom of the Sages. Yep, that's it, Chintamani. Your Destiny 108@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Harry Bo from Cali, Colombia.
Uh,